So left unchecked, fire ants could cause large impacts on some of our country's largest industries and have the potential to blind, injure, kill, as I said. In countries overseas such as Texas, ranch owners are unable to use large portions of their land, so they can have really big economic effects as well. So for all of these reasons, fire ants are a Category 1 restricted matter. And at the moment, what is happening in Australia is, and I was talking to someone earlier and I said 2028, that was incorrect. We have got to 2032 to eradicate ants from Australia. If we fail, then we will move to a suppression strategy, which means that we will not receive the millions and millions of dollars of funding that we're getting at the moment to try to eradicate ants. And once we move to suppression, eradication will be impossible permanently, and we will live with fire ants in this country forever. So it is actually quite a massive issue. Now, the only way we can eradicate ants, this is where they exist at the moment. You'll see that it's sort of southeast Queensland down to the sort of the top of northern New South Wales. How the treatment plan that is taking place at the moment is creating a boundary and moving inwards. And so we're trying to constantly move that boundary in all the time through treatment. The only way we can actually be successful in full treatment and eradication is with 100% treatment of all properties where fire ants are detected. So what that means is that we really depend on exhaustive, collective community cooperation. Our treatment process is effective, but it is really based on everybody participating in the treatment. So if fire ants are detected on one property, the properties all around it need to be treated. They need to be treated in a very small window of time, and all the property owners need to cooperate in that treatment, and 100% compliance with the treatment needs to occur. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So we really need support of people. So at the moment we have, or when we were doing this research, we had 98.5% compliance rate. Fantastic. No. Bad. Because we don't need 98.5% to eradicate, we need 100%. So it's a bit like, I like to use this analogy, people think I'm a bit crazy when I do, but it's a bit like our electricity network in Australia. In Australia, we need our electricity to work 100% of the time. So we actually build and invest in infrastructure that enables our electricity to stay on in 6 hours a year. 6 hours a year where it is a peak is what they build our network for. Now, I'm actually just making that up. I did do this work before. It was something like 6 hours. I can't remember if it was exactly 6 hours, but it is something like that. So now in other countries, they don't worry about that. They don't worry about if they lose electricity for several times a year in those peak times. But in Australia, we expect to have electricity 100% of the time. So we have to build something for just that small amount. And that's the same as our fire ant eradication program. We need to actually build a program that works with getting 100% compliance. Now, with our projected treatments that we expect to do, or our properties that we expect to do this year, so we did this research last year, we're expecting 250,000 treatment sites over this year. And what we will see if we don't actually reduce that refusal rate, that's going to actually equate to 3,250 refusing property owners. So every time a property owner refuses, the resources that need to be put into persuading that property owner to reverse their refusal is actually costing a lot of money and slowing down the whole progress and actually undermining our entire eradication program. So the main barrier to eradication is not the ants themselves, it's actually humans, which is where the Behavioural Economics Research team comes into it. And we like to call ourselves BERT. not that Bert, the other Bert. And so the Behavioural Economics Research team is based in the Department of the Premier and Cabinet in Queensland Government. We are a cross-government centre of excellence, and we are there to provide the behavioural economics and application of behavioural science to really try to get under the hood of these more difficult behavioural problems and challenges that we have. So we set out last year, our project took pretty much probably most of the year, about 9 months to do. We use a framework called TESS, which is shown up here. And in this project, we did the target, explore and solution stage, and the solutions have been implemented, and we're now tracking the effectiveness of those solutions. So we started off with a target behaviour workshop where we got everybody together, all the stakeholders, people from the program, people who are actually dealing with the property owners who refuse. And we got in a room and we looked at the process that we're currently using in terms of the community engagement, and we used the collective wisdom of all the different stakeholders to try to identify what are the real problems here, where's things going wrong, what could be contributing to this refusal behaviour, which parts of our process are working, which parts aren't working. So we started there with looking at the internal processes. We then went and did journey mapping interviews with actual property owners who had refused. And what we did with them is we took them right back, we got them to take us back to what they determined to be the beginning of the process in relation to their refusal for property treatment, and take us all the way through the process, what happened from their point of view, how they were approached, how they actually how they were engaged with by the program, all the things that went right, all the things that went wrong, all the emotions that they felt, right through to beyond their refusal, right through to what they determined to be the end of the process. So we used that to actually develop up the journey maps, aggregated journey maps. And these provided, I don't know if anyone's done journey mapping, but if you use this as a technique, it is one of the most fabulous qualitative methodologies that you can use to really understand very granular issues that are going on, all the factors that contribute to a particular outcome, whatever it is you're looking at. And what we found is we were able to then apply our 5 Cs framework, which I won't go into now, but it's a framework that we use to actually categorise the behaviour, motivators and barriers, and all the factors that actually contribute to an actual behaviour. And in this case, the behaviour is the refusal in itself. And we actually then use the output from the journey maps to develop up this, what we call a qualitative hypothetical model of drivers of the refusal. So then we went into, so that was our first round of exploratory research. We then went into doing some quantitative work. So there's a lot of text there on that slide that just describes the methodology we went through. We did a quantitative study. We ended up getting a sample size of 1,022 property owners, and we actually opened it up to all property owners, of which the refusing property owners were part of that. So we actually over-recruited for the refusing property owners so that we could look at them. And what we were doing was we're trying to actually just quantify all of those contributing factors to see, well, which ones are the most prevalent ones that we need to tackle in terms of addressing this refusal response. And so we had 3 key research questions. How are people who refuse different from all the people who don't refuse? What's important to understand about that person to try to eliminate this behaviour? What personal factors, characteristics and beliefs most contribute to a refusal comparative to a non-refusal, and how do the engagement activities undertaken by the program itself contribute to a refusal? So we applied another theory, the trans-theoretical stages of change model, And because what we discovered is that refusal and non-refusal is not binary. There was actually a spectrum. In fact, quite concerningly, we've discovered that there were a lot of people who did actually contemplate refusing who didn't refuse, thank goodness. And we also discovered, and we quantified this, we discovered that there was a proportion so that our people who acted and actually did the refusal behaviour were equate to about the refusal rate that we had from our actual database of actual property owners refusing, which was good to see. But we also noticed that there was another percentage of people who actually are saying that they would probably refuse next time as well. So they continue to maintain their refusal response. That is not ideal, because what would then happen is not only are we going to have more properties to treat this year, we're going to have, if the refusal rate actually goes up, that will make it a much more exponentially large and significant problem, wasting our very precious funding that we have on putting resource to managing refusals instead of actually getting out there and treating the problem. So it was a really big issue. So when we looked at, well, let's look at this refuser. How are they different? What's going on with these people? Now, there was a bit of a working hypothesis amongst the people who worked for the program itself that these people were crazy. They're illogical. They're nutbags. They're sovereign citizens. They hate the government. They're completely, nutty. They're terrorists. And what we found is actually almost the opposite of that. We found that these people are highly logical, highly educated. They were actually quite reasonable. What we also found is that they had generally a higher level of scientific knowledge than the people that were sent out to knock on their doors and try to do the treatment. So when these refusers started to question how safe are these chemicals, what's it going to do to my family, to my dogs, to my pets, the crews that were sent out to do the treatment, they had nothing. They couldn't actually answer the questions. And what we also found is then that would generate quite often this reactance. And so reactance is a psychological response where you're actually trying to persuade people to do something. They've already made a decision. You're trying to overturn that decision, and your persuasion techniques actually to force them to increase their resistance. So instead of actually sort of diluting their resistance and reversing their decision, you're actually sending them much more strongly into a position of resistance. So we really had to think of ways that we could overcome those issues. So the following conditions had the strongest relationship to the refusal versus the non-refusal. So what we found is that people that had no direct engagement with the program prior to the crews turning up to treat were much more likely to have a refusal response or to contemplate a refusal response. So direct engagement prior to turning up to treat was really critical. Sharing information. So we found that for being able to answer fairly technical scientific questions in the moment on the doorstep was really critical. And as I mentioned, some of the people that were refusing had very strong chemical backgrounds in science or environmental backgrounds or backgrounds dealing with chemicals, and so they were asking some really quite educated questions, and the treatment crews were often not necessarily educated. In fact, at one stage it was a redeployment or an employment option for people leaving corrective services. So they weren't skilled in any way and weren't able to handle the questions. Understanding the program authority. So the interesting thing about this is that the National Fire Ant Eradication Program has legal authority to enter your property without consent. So they could just go onto the property whether you said yes or no anyway. But what they need to often do is, for the safety of the crews, is take police in with them. Because you've got to remember that they think that these people are sovereign citizens, so they could have guns, they could come out and shoot you. So, and they didn't want to get to that point. So understanding that authority up front really made a big difference as well. Building trust and social license, helping them understand the risks and how the chemicals work. The chemicals actually don't kill the fire ants or any other insects or animals in the environment. What it does is make the queen of the nest infertile. So just explaining that, and then also we found there was quite a strong social effect. If people knew that their neighbours had already let them treat, that was also something that really motivated people to allow treatment and to not have that refusal response. So they implemented quite a few new initiatives, and I guess the biggest learning overall was they were actually doing a community engagement program based on a mass approach, and 100% of people, what they really needed to do was base their community engagement program on that 1.5%. Because the rest of them mostly were pre-contemplators. They were just going to let them treat regardless. So they've implemented a no notification, no treatment rule, making sure that they really do 100% direct engagement beforehand, applying the behavioural science principle, the familiarity principle. They have established a whole heap of tiered information, and they've got much more intense support for customers that have these really tricky scientific questions. So prior to that, they had a universal one-fits-all strategy for their information and their fact sheets that they handed out. Now it's very segmented and tiered. So it really sort of works to that behavioural science principle of uncertainty reduction theory. And providing so quite often, once a person's refused, it's kind of too late to then try to negotiate and persuade them to overturn that reversal, because they go into that reactance. Makes it very difficult. But if you can prevent them from refusing in the first place, that makes a big difference. And one of the things that really contributes to that is that very clear early establishment of the authority that the program has to enter regardless. And also finding the right people in the community and use them as community ambassadors. So really using messenger effect, which another behavioural science principle. So the results so far, and I apologise, I do not have data more up to date than this. I did ask them many times to send it over to me, but alas, I did not get it in time. However, what you can see is the green line, and the refusal rate this year after the implementation of these new marketing activities is a lot lower than what it was last year. And so we are seeing that refusal rate come right down, and I'm hoping that it has continued to stay that way. So I think that's it, if anyone has any questions. Thank you. I think Joan has a question.
I have a question about this making the queen infertile.
Oh, yes. Okay.
If the chemical just makes the fire ant queen infertile,
Mm-hmm.
what does it do to the fertility of the other little ants?
Well, the queen's the only one that breeds.
Sorry, the other.
It kills the nest. So every nest is its own family. So, and I only know this from what Chris has taught me, but every nest is its own family, and they can DNA test the families, so they know when they've wiped out a family, and they know when a new family emerges. So if you make the queen infertile, then that she stops breeding, and once she stops breeding, I think she dies, and then everybody else dies. No, just that nest. So that family dies. So they're trying to kill out nests, nest family by family by family. And what they're also getting is incursions still. And this incursion came through the port of Brisbane. So little ant got off the ship and created this problem. Probably more than one ant, but anyway. They're still finding new family species coming in through incursions through the port as well. So it is a really big problem. I don't know about mutating, but yeah. So it is a big problem. property owners. Yes, so the property owners who are refusing are generally a little bit more scientifically motivated or educated. They didn't always know how the chemical worked, though. The other problem, there were lots and lots of problems. When they did research on the science behind the chemicals that the program uses, there's actually the fact sheets that they were putting out, but the manufacturers of the chemicals were putting out were different to what the program was saying. So there was actually quite a lot of problems in credibility of the information because the sources were saying different things. And these property owners who were refusing were finding that out, which then undermined the credibility of the program even further. And some of the property owners, they don't just refuse, they refuse really. In fact, a couple have taken the program to court to try to say, no, you're not coming on and treating my... So it's a big problem. Yeah, and if we don't eradicate by 2032, then they'll stop. They'll just move to suppression. They won't. They'll stop trying to eradicate. So all Australians should really be very kind of keen to eradicate, because once the government gives up, then yeah, we live with fire ants forever. Yay! Everyone looks really shocked. Yep.
Yeah. And can you incentivise, or is there some way, like, you can just, I don't know, like, you get a discount on your electricity or something? I mean, what's going to motivate those people?
Well, I think that's a tough one, because then you'd have to sort of give everybody, and so 98.5% of people aren't even thinking about it. Yeah, that would cost a lot. The other concern they had actually, and I suspected that there wouldn't be many questions, so I was going to actually ask you guys a question. And the question is, do you think that there would be concern about if you change your whole community engagement strategy or marketing effort to target the 1.5% of refusers? Do you think that might then create a problem with all these pre-contemplators who aren't even thinking about it, going, well, hang on, maybe I should refuse as well? Did anyone think that? Well,
it's just so high, isn't it?
yeah. So they were very worried about that as well, by actually changing their engagement strategy, that they might actually raise the a kind of the awareness or kind of put it on the radar for the people who weren't actually worried about it. So they were quite concerned about that. So they tracked it, and it did. It caused more calls coming into the call centre. However, those people still didn't really, their heart wasn't in it. They really did. They were very persuadable. And actually what they found is that it was it was a benefit, because they had people actually proactively engaging that weren't before, and it was giving the call centre the ability to have these conversations, and they found that it was a kind of a good engagement strategy. So those higher levels coming into the call centre gave the call centre a lot more competency around, discussing the issue. So it was quite good. Yeah.
Is there a role for mid-level organizations to get engaged here to sort of create more reach? And, from that vantage, it could be any form of community organization. I'm just thinking the spin-off from what is the influence network?
Or the transferable. I think there's a lot of transferable learnings in this one. I think the issue around reactants, that was a really big insight, and I think that what they were doing is they were going into this kind of downward spiral of trying to persuade and negotiate, and it was too late. They'd already refused. And they were trying to persuade based on the wrong persuasion effects as well. and it was actually causing people to become more resistant and stubborn. So their efforts in trying to kind of negotiate with these refusers actually made the refusal problem even worse, which is why they ended up in court with a couple of them. So learning about that reactance was really important, and I think that that's probably something that does happen in other areas as well. And there's other issues like wearing seatbelts. 1.5% of people not wearing seatbelts. That's not okay. So
Sometimes it's
yeah.
just because I just want to reject because government is saying so.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
attitude is very prevalent.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really been an incredibly successful strategy to have 90, I know that we want 100, but to have 98% of landholders actually going along with it is, I can't think of many other
Well,
programs that achieve that
it's
level.
but it is actually a big problem. No, they've done some modelling, and they think that if they can get it under 0.5%, that they could still achieve eradication. So that's what they're aiming for.
Focusing on the 2% or the 0.5%, I know that with, the tobacco industry, the more that you send the message that people don't smoke anymore,
Mm.
nobody's smoking anymore, then the more positive that impact that has. Because if people believe that
Yes.
everyone else is, I think it's underage sex, sorry. If people think everyone else is having sex, and it really encourages them to have sex, right? But if they think that actually nobody is, then
Yeah.
it can empower them.
Yeah.
Yeah, then they can smoke. But the thing is here, have they tried publicising the fact that everybody's going along with this?
Yeah, so that's what the bit where they were doing, using the social norms around, your neighbours are doing it, people in the community, and they're doing that at probably not advertising so much, but at an engagement level in the community. So there's a lot of engagement initiatives that they use, and a lot of the messaging goes through engagement. But yeah, so
Someone be highlighting the 1.5%.
no, it's they talk about everybody's doing this, but everybody needs to do it as well. But it's also explaining to people the eradication versus suppression strategy and the implications of that. People don't understand that as well. So if we go to suppression, like this funding that they're doing for eradication, which is multiple millions of dollars a year, that won't be sustained past 2032. It's just for the purpose of trying to achieve eradication. And if they don't achieve it by then that'll go. They may, I don't know if they even will have they won't have an NFAEP, might be an NFASP, but they won't have an eradication program. They'll have a suppression program, but they may not even have the crews going out and treating. It'll just be everybody has to just treat themselves.
Just wonder if there's any policy change between now and that time. If a property is sold and it hasn't been treated, that a continuing sale is that they have to.
Yes.
Like tick the box of like
Yes.
the government says this isn't safe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not for looking into, but at least it could be a measure, a policy level to.
Yeah, that was one of the things that we talked about. But it's a little bit sort of like you can have no fire ants one week and then you can have fire ants the next week. They just pop up. The way they travel and the distances they can cover. When we had Cyclone Alfred, I actually should have put it in my presentation, but the pictures of these little ant rafts, they build, it's like a tower of just nothing but ants, and they float down, and they were floating in the floodwaters. So that was one of the biggest risks, was floodwater and the ants going everywhere. And they did. They went everywhere and they popped up all over the place. And if they pop up that boundary, if they pop up outside that boundary, that's an absolute crisis. They have to immediately send teams straight to that location, because they don't want anything outside the boundary to go any further. So it's a priority. So they might have to pause what they're doing inside the boundary and get all the resources out to. And they have had some down in New South Wales, but underneath. Yeah, I think Joe was first. Sorry.
It's not really a question, but I really enjoyed it. Thank you. And it made us think we're working on childhood vaccination. And it's a small percentage who are refusing of parents refusing child vaccination.
Yes, yes, yeah. It's a similar. No, and that's where I think some of the learnings from this are transferable into those other areas where people hold these. And I don't know how educated those parents are actually, 'cause I haven't done the research, but some might be, but they do a lot of research. They strike me, they might be similar kind of people to the refusing property owners. And they certainly have a position, a very strong ideology based on probably, research. And I think that, you definitely need to engage with them very differently to the rest of the community.
Sorry, I'm going to just stop.
Yes, sorry.
It's 4:26. I realize that you are on the planet.
I need to go and... You will see me again in a second.
Thank